The star witness sat at the edge of the hotel bed, upon an ugly brown bedspread. He was slumped over his knees scarred from old sports injuries, car accidents, and beatings. He sat on the bed in his hotel room, a glass of bourbon and ice in his right hand. He sat and pondered his next steps. Antonin Rushik had once been such a small and weak child, a voiceless and defenseless boy, but he worked hard his whole life to become strong and powerful. Now he could feel that power, pride, and strength tumbling out of his grip. It was late at night, and Rushmore was sequestered in the hotel room that the prosecutor's office booked for him. He had waited there, guarded, for 3 nights. He was scheduled to testify the next day, but received the call at 4 o'clock that the trial was on hold. Everything was halted, and he'd be flying back to North Carolina within the next few days, until the trial could be rescheduled. Rushmore started drinking promptly at 4:01 p.m. He'd never been much of a drinker, but the hotel didn't permit smoking. No cigars were allowed in his room. He snuck downstairs to the parking lot when he could, but there were armed guards on him and they would clock his breaks, only 5 minutes apiece. "Let's take you back to your room," they patronized, like a bunch of goddamn babysitters, and he would have to stub out his cigar and leave it lying on the pavement unfinished. But the hotel room had a minibar with 2 little bottles of Jack Daniels, so he drank both of those and then called the front desk for more. When the bellman came to his room to deliver the new bottles around dinner time, Rushmore opened the door and saw that his guards were gone. They might have been taking a break, he figured. They could also have been dismissed. Who the hell knew? Who cared? They were sending him back into the witness protection program until they were sure what the status of Mr. Ashner's heart was. He spent almost 2 decades at Poppy's right hand, but he did not miss his employer this evening. He did not think about his former boss's condition or feel any commiseration for the ailing old man. He'd spent all that time for nothing, he realized, chauffeuring the man all over town like a glorified errand boy, driving Poppy all the way to Tampa, Florida, to bring his 2 bratty granddaughters home that summer many years before, standing at Ashner's kitchen table, waiting for the old man to finish breakfast and to give his orders, carrying groceries for his wife, attending graduations and weddings and funerals, but not as a guest. Oh no, certainly never as a guest. Just the driver, hired help. That's all he'd ever been. He even sent a cottage for that damn kid when he died, the grandson-in-law, but still he didn't get what he rightly earned. He knew everything about the family, all of them. He'd been there for everything since 1981. He met Ashner long before that, of course, and he believed he was owed for all of it. Now he swigged his bourbon and watched pay-per-view television with the sound off, and visualized all his power, all his potential, his earnings, his reward crumbling away. The Ashners had known nothing really about him. Even Poppy, who spent practically every day for 17 years with Rushmore, knew little about the man, and most of what he knew was false. Poppy believed the man was loyal. He understood Rushmore to be calm and patient. He regarded his employee as a good Jew, a survivor, a pillar of his world. In fact, Antonin Rushik was not Jewish at all. He was born to a Polish woman and an Italian father, a worthless artist who forced himself on his mother when she was 19. His mother was a maid who worked for a prominent optician in Krakow. The doctor was warm, eccentric, and often forgetful. He was married to a blonde German woman, a classical pianist. This was the optician's second marriage. Rushmore's mother became pregnant early on in her employment with the doctor's family. The wife always suspected that the baby might secretly be her husband's and didn't trust the maid. The doctor was so tender-hearted, the wife surmised, this might have been an affair. Now he wants to keep her in our home with the bastard. Both Rushmore and his mother suffered at the hands of this woman for the next 9 years. The doctor's 17-year-old daughter, a product of his first marriage, was at boarding school in Switzerland. When she visited, the doctor's attention was squarely on her rather than his suspicious, angry wife. This only further enraged the woman, causing her to spend more effort hovering over their domestic health. The optician had left his first wife for his second. She felt justified in questioning his fidelity. Rushmore's own sexual awakening began at the age of 7, thanks to the daughter. He liked to spy on her when she used the toilet. He was his mother's only child, and although she had precious little time for the boy, she loved Antonin dearly. Her father died during the Great War, and her mother was killed before the girl was 15 when a tram ran over her. There was no other family. She worked for the optician for 10 years. When the Nazis marched into Poland, the family huddled around the radio, listening intently. Their beautiful music programs were silenced. Everyone fixated on the invasion. They were aghast, mostly at having soldiers on the street, but not really concerned with the threat of fascism. During Rushmore's mother's trips to market, however, she often came upon soldiers tormenting the local Jews. She would watch, horrified, as they were made to scrub the pavement after the soldiers themselves would smear horse feces upon it. She saw a woman kicked unconscious, while witnesses watched and laughed. Once she saw a young man hiding in a coal bin, covered head to toe in soot. Nobody was watching. She snuck him to her employer's yard, gave the panicky young man a bath, and discovered a very nice, handsome, and grateful 20-year-old Jew underneath the black and grime. The young man was an engineering student from the Akademia Górniczo-Hutnicka University of Science. She couldn't keep the student where she lived, but she had a girlfriend that she trusted, who lived a few blocks away with an old maiden aunt who was deaf. The old lady thought the man was a nephew visiting from the countryside. Rushmore's mother brought him food whenever she could sneak away, and a romance began to form. The police found her naked in bed with the man as they entered the apartment, following a neighborhood tip. The officers spat at her, a Gentile having intercourse with a Jew. If she'd just given up, they might have gone easier on her. She fought the police when they tried to arrest the man, defended her lover. The man was sent to the Gross-Rosen forced labor camp, and Rushmore's mother to Stutthof. She survived many months, in cold, in hunger. Meanwhile, the doctor suspected that his wife had turned the maid in, and in his shame over her cold-heartedness, he vowed to protect the child. He sent the wife back to her family in Dresden, and upon his daughter's graduation, shipped her off to live with a colleague in Swansea. Secretly, he feared that the bastard might be half Jewish, since the father had not been revealed. He fixed a death certificate for Antonin and hid him in his home while he worked out an elaborate plan to squirrel the child out of the country. Rushmore was hidden inside the house for the next 23 months. Several times he was locked in a cabinet without explanation. He was a quiet lad and thus presumed thoughtful, but he was not. Antonin was detached. He did suffer during this period with shortened rations and loneliness. He missed his mother. He had no friends. Even the lovely daughter had gone away. The doctor suffered bouts of kidney infections as the rations grew shorter and shorter, and twice he postponed his plans to get the boy and himself out of Poland. Finally, he worked out an elaborate plan to take the child through Lithuania. They spent a week in the forest near Bialystok, shuttled through a covert chain of rebel encampments. They were walking by night as they crossed through Druskianki when they came upon a group of Allied soldiers. The doctor told the soldiers he came across the boy near one of the camps, and he gave Antonin a false Semitic surname, Rushik. They were given passage on a military transport across the Baltic Sea to Denmark, and then to Ipswich to find the doctor's daughter. Helene was now engaged to a British airman. The fiancé had a cousin who lived in New York. Helene encouraged her father to send the boy there. A life in America? What could be better for Antonin? He cannot stay in Europe, and we don't know where his mother is. Frankly, her motives were less than altruistic. She wanted nothing to do with the little bastard. Her father's health was poor. He needed to stay on the continent. The brat, however, needed to go. So Antonin was packed off on a steamer ship for the New World. He was told that the soldier's cousin would greet him by the docks when he arrived. The cousin worked for a grocer. That excited Antonin. There would be tables full of food, he daydreamed. He'd never starve. He'd get everything that he deserved, and eventually be reunited with his mother. He hadn't heard from her in several months. Instead, some random teen that the cousin knew met Rushmore at the wharf. They walked for an hour to get to where he'd be staying, which was in New Jersey, not New York. The adolescent dropped the kid off at a 2-room steaming flat in Jersey City, a slum house. Rushmore learned that the cousin and his family were far from prosperous. The grocer was in his mid-30s, the wife was a little younger, and they had a screaming baby, plus the wife's sister to boot, all living there. The wife was a slob. The husband was dishonorably discharged from the army and spent a year in the brig. He managed the grocery store. He wasn't the owner. The sister-in-law was the worst, however. She was well on her way to becoming a prostitute, from what Antonin could gather. Every week she invited another roughneck man up to visit her during the afternoons, and she'd send their house guest out into the streets while she entertained. Rushmore was a nuisance to them from the moment he arrived. The wife would beat him whenever he annoyed her, and the grocer came home at night, drank rot-gut whiskey, and yelled at everyone. The sister was foul-mouthed, lewd, and the apartment was a pigsty. He learned a few months later that his mother died before he even left Poland. Nobody sought to comfort Antonin, and the telegram from the doctor in England arrived. He lived with these people for a year, and then he followed a salesman of pornographic films, stags, and snookers out to Pittsburgh. At 15, he met an 18-year-old girl living on her own after her parents threw her out. He moved in with her. He would work for a week or a month, here and there. He'd get pissed and quit or get sacked, usually for insolence. The girl threw Antonin out when she discovered he was two-timing her. The other girl, a Dutch girl of 17, claimed she was pregnant. By the time her parents figured out she wasn't, Rushmore got thrown out on his ear. This time he figured it out first, and he stole what he could from the family, sold those goods to pay for rent on his own place. At 18, he moved to Chicago, and at 23, to Detroit. That was in 59, and good things were happening in the Motor City, especially in his line of work. He never married and had no children. He worked as a bellhop in Chicago and a bouncer at a place that sold hash on the South Side. He met a lot of wise guys and ingratiated himself in quickly. They thought he was half Italian, which he was, although he didn't know it. He got sent to Detroit by the Chicago boss to snoop out the Lower Sicilians, a group dealing in heroin. He did not meet Michael Ashner right away. Poppy was a business owner, a serious player, and a family man. Rushmore did solid work for the next decade, building his way up within the organization. He met Poppy at a first communion party for one of Zeffirelli's daughters. He immediately knew that Ashner was the right dog to follow, and his previous faked Jewish ancestry came in handy. He figured that through Poppy he'd gain rank, be the most powerful man in this business, and become rich. Over the next 2 decades, he found reasons to run errands that brought him around Poppy. He wasn't a gift giver, but he would share information, which in their line of work was more valuable. Poppy rose to where he was because he understood the value of relationships. Rushmore did not, but he knew enough to play along. He nodded. He agreed. He did what was necessary to convince his superiors of his loyalty. He was convinced that Poppy was ascending within the organization, and that he, Rushmore, was exactly the kind of man that Poppy would want by his side, and eventually pass his legacy on to. When Poppy left the business, a bitterness began to take root in Rushmore. He'd tethered himself to the wrong person, but rather than turning that doubt inward upon his own judgment, he felt betrayed and baffled. Was he nothing but a sidekick? A good mutt? No, he assured himself. He just needed a leader to take him where he wanted to go, and his leader had waved bye-bye. Or did he? Maybe he just needed to lay low. Maybe Michael Ashner didn't think Rushmore deserved advancement. When Poppy retired, he actually set it up so that no one, at least among the other unmade men, could ascend to the position he held within the organization. Oh, Poppy still had connections. He still knew people, and he still arranged things. He attended their weddings, bar mitzvahs, celebrations. At least until Beatrice became too ill. Poppy and Rushmore ran into one another again in 1979 at a dinner party. Rushmore believed that the older man had fooled everyone outside the organization into thinking he was out, but really he was right there all along. When Poppy offered the younger man a position a year later to work for him, Rushmore assumed it was to help Poppy emerge from the shadows. But it was sentiment only that caused Ashner to reach out to his former underling, hired as a driver, a chauffeur, an errand runner. He held no genuine affection for Ashner, although he respected the man. But that respect was premised by the notion that Poppy still held clout in the syndicate, and that Rushmore, soon to be appointed as his protege, would be shown the keys to the kingdom. Sure, the old man was foolish and sentimental, but Rushmore did what he could to ingratiate himself with the Hungarian. He could mutter a few Hebrew phrases and learned Kaddish and other prayers phonetically. Poppy never once told Rushmore that he was still in the organization, still doing business. But the younger man knew people who talked about Ashner like he was still in. A dog with a bone, he could not let it go. Rushmore had no passions, no hobbies. Wine, food, clothing, they were consumed simply as needed, or as required to fit in. He smoked his cheap cigars and gambled indiscriminately. By the year Antonin was 30, his only female companions were call girls. A year ago, when Poppy began to go on errands alone, Rushmore grew suspicious. Where was he going? Who was he seeing, and what exactly was he up to? If he knew that Poppy was simply stripping the South American massage therapist, he wouldn't have believed it. Rushmore was alarmed at the occasions when the boss wasn't available or returned driving his own car. First, he thought Poppy was shopping for another driver. Later, he began to suspect more nefarious intentions. The kind of dealings he deserved to sit in on. Damn it. He'd earned that. He told himself that he couldn't care less that he was not invited to the family gatherings, but that hurt too. After all, the Schwarze was there. Why was he excluded? Rushmore was ripe as a summer plum when the feds sought him out. He was ready to squeal that very day. But first, he wanted to make sure something was in it for him. He'd waited long enough, hadn't he? Now, dejected, he spent the night sequestered in a crappy hotel near the Renaissance Center, eating room service hamburgers and watching softcore porn. He didn't even bother to read the papers. He knew as soon as he heard about the heart attack that he would never claim what was rightfully his. The Star Witness opened the minibar again, determined to suck dry the amenities before they sent him packing.